you know, I think the only way to be when you're doing YouTube or when you're making art or whatever is to be genuine, to be real, to be honest, Even if you're creating a fantasy, even if you're creating a fictional story, you have to be honest. Come from your honest perspective. And I'm not going to extend this for too long. But I wanted to talk about real quick that somebody came to my YouTube channel the other day to one of my videos, and he wrote, "All of your commentary is leftist." I was like, what? Like, what? Like, all my commentary is leftist? Like, first of all, who uses the term leftist in this country? That's kind of weird. But I understand there's a left and a right, and we're talking politically, and, it just kind of, it made me stop. And my response to him was, what's your point? Yo, I think this is going to be an awesome video. This is probably not going to sound as good as it generally sounds because I'm using a microphone on the top of the camera and I'm about 3 feet away from the camera, 2.5 or 3 feet. But I forgot to charge my Hollyland Lark Max. So this is going to have to do just for today. And of course, I'm using the Panasonic S5 because I felt like shooting full frame. I'm using my Minolta 35mm f2.8 Rokkor lens. I love it. I have an ND filter on because I'm at ISO 4000, which is the top of the dual native ISO on this camera. That way I can control the aperture much easier. And I love shooting in low light conditions like this. And as you can see, there's like almost no noise. It's pretty incredible. I have a key light in front of me over here, a little RGB light. I have the same light over here as a hair light or a backlight. I got some practicals behind me. And hopefully it looks pretty good. Hopefully it feels the way I feel right now. So, I'm pretty sure there used to be something here, but I have no idea what it was. It looks like this was like a foundation to some kind of building, obviously. And there's a car wash over there, and there's an old grocery store down past here, and there's a whole town down that way, and yeah, there used to be something here. But things change, other things come in, and life goes on. I am not a political person. As a matter of fact, for most of my life, I didn't even pay attention to politics. I didn't like politics. Politics to me are like marketing. It's just like a lot of lying, like a lot of manipulating, trying to convince you of stuff. But it also, as I've gotten older, I realize it's really important. With regards to basic human rights and economy and healthcare and things like that. Like, it's very important. So I used to shoot with an APS-C camera. I had a Sony a6400, and I actually chose that camera because, first of all, it was something I could afford. Second of all, at the time, it was like the most talked about camera, at least in the YouTube space that I was looking at. And also, I had learned that most major films throughout history have been shot on Super 35, which was APS-C, or at least the closest thing to it. And so I thought, this is perfect. I want to make movies. And so I shot with an APS-C camera, Sony A6400. It was 8-bit. I tried every lens in creation because they were really cheap. All the Tamron and Sigmas and Rokinons and Samyang and everything. I tried everything. And eventually, and I got some great footage out of it. I told some great stories. And I basically learned how to use a camera with that APS-C camera. That's really where I learned. That's where I learned about, you know, white balance and aperture and ISO settings and composition and how to stabilize a camera, because that camera had no IBIS, like no stabilization. So I learned how to become kind of at one with the camera. And I learned about different focal lengths and how that affected the story and the image, and why you would choose certain focal lengths, other focal lengths, and how some of them feel a little bit more intimate than other ones, like long shots that you can get without being close seem intimate in their own way, but when you get really close with a wide lens, it kind of makes the audience feel like they're more a part of what's going on, because the camera is like right here. You know, you could take a really long lens and shoot from far away and get a close-up of somebody, but they don't even know that you're shooting them. And so I tend to choose, you know, more wide-angle lenses because I like to get up in there, you know. I like to be a part of what I'm doing. I also learned that even though the A6400 had great autofocus, I wasn't into it. You know, like it screwed up all the time. And was it amazing? Yeah, it was kind of amazing, I guess, but it screwed up all the time, at least with what I was intending. And so I really, really like buried myself in studying how to manually focus, pull focus, you know, choose what part of the frame I wanted to focus on, how the focus was different depending upon the aperture that you chose and how it affected the rest of the frame, and, you know, different parts of the frame, and how if you get towards the edges, it's a little bit more distorted, but when you get in the middle, it's kind of more clear and more kind of like what it really looks like. And I just learned so much from the Sony A6400. But ultimately, I decided, when I was getting ready to shoot a feature film, and by the way, rewind a little bit, I had already shot a feature film on my phone. And that's really where I learned the basics of ISO settings and white balance and, you know, frame rates. And it crossed my mind, even though I love this camera, I love the S5, but I think I only love it because it's mine. And I've done so many projects with it now, and I'm used to it, and I'm attached to it, and I know it like the back of my hand. I know all the settings. I got it all set up for me. Like, I love it, you know. But I love the GH5 now, too. I've been using that quite a bit. And I have that all set up for me. And that's all a part of me, and I kind of know that like the back of my hand. Not to the extent that I know the S5 yet. But I've been thinking a lot about the GH7. But then I was getting ready to shoot another feature film, and I wanted to up the ante. I wanted to do better. I wanted to make it look better. And I also realized that my color grading and my, you know, color thing was getting stronger and stronger. My editing skills, I had started in DaVinci Resolve simply because it was free. But I started with DaVinci Resolve, and I learned so much, and I started to really get good at it. And I realized I wanted to see if there was really a big difference between 10-bit and 8-bit. And so I wanted to get a camera that could shoot 10-bit 422. I was always shooting in log already. And thank you to, like, what's his name? James Matthews. I don't know how I tied all this in together. I guess it's a matter of being genuine and being comfortable with who you are and where you're at and what you're doing, and not longing for something else, and not feeling like there's something better out there, and not trying to be something that you're not, and not trying to hide who you are. I copied his settings for the color profile, which was Cine 4. And it was like just beautiful. It was amazing. Once I put that into my camera and set everything there, I never shot in anything else unless I was shooting in low light, where that guy Josh Yo from Make Art Now, he gave some settings for nighttime shooting with the A6400, and it was like off the charts incredible, like remarkable. And so I was using that. And so I love the A6400. It was working well for me. However, I wanted to see if there was a big difference with 10-bit. And I also hadn't really had enough experience yet to make truly informed decisions based on being an experienced filmmaker. And so I also was going to shoot a lot in low light for this film. And so I also thought, I should get a full frame camera. By the way, this is a battery, not a microphone. I had to switch batteries just before I started. So anyway, I started looking at the Sony FX3 and the A7S3 because I was in that Sony world, and all the reviews I was watching were Sony people, and everything I was watching was Sony because I didn't know at the time, but that's what YouTube does. But I thought Sony is like the only camera in the world because that was all I was seeing on my feed every day. For you, a video for you, and it was all Sony stuff, and it was like all these Sony, like celebrities kind of, and I had seen them going on these trips, and it was just kind of cool. So I wanted to stay in the Sony world because I thought that was the best because that's what everybody was saying. So I was looking at the FX3 and the A7S3. I was also looking at the Sony A7 III because I thought, it's a legendary camera. It's kind of old. It doesn't have a lot of stuff, but it's still 8-bit. So I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. But then I saw a couple of videos that kind of got through for some reason, my algorithm, and I was looking at the Panasonic S5. But then I thought to myself, why don't I shoot APS-C if that's the way most movies were shot throughout history? You know what I mean? Like, why am I not looking at a Sony FX3, which has everything? Great dynamic range. It's got great stabilization, good enough. Maybe not good as Lumix, but great. It's got, better autofocus than I have, even though I don't use autofocus. The only problem would be that I would have to get rid of all my stuff and sell it because I couldn't use my L-mount lenses on the E-mount of Sony. And this guy, Patrick Tomaso, specifically really resonated with me, like I believed him. Even though he's kind of a sarcastic motherfucker, he seems like a really nice guy. He seems very knowledgeable, he's very confident, and he just seemed like he was speaking reasonable stuff to me, like it made sense to me. And so I started to do the deep dive into the Panasonic S5. And so I was looking at the S1H and the S5, and ultimately I wound up getting an S5 because it cost me less than half of what I was going to have to spend on the A7S3 or the FX3. And I was using vintage lenses. And so it didn't really matter, I was going to adapt them anyway. Because I shoot 28 millimeters and 50 millimeters. I have two old Minolta lenses, Rokkor. One of them is a f2.8, and the 50 millimeter is an f1.4. And so I was going to adapt them to whatever camera I got. And so I wound up getting the S5, and I fell in love with it. And so I used to shoot with the A6400. But then I changed, and now I shoot with Panasonic, and I swear by Lumix, and all of a sudden everything coming through my feed is Panasonic stuff. I started to see other YouTubers, and it like opened up a whole different world. So I kind of have my Sony education, and now I have a Lumix education. All of these cameras are exactly the same. Once you know what you're doing, once you know how to set your white balance, once you know about your ISO settings, once you know how to work with your aperture, once you decide that if you're shooting 24 frames per second that you set your shutter angle and all that kind of stuff, like the 180-degree rule, once you get your composition together, once you develop a style, give me Micro Four Thirds, give me APS-C, give me my full frame, it's going to look the same. I can blow out the background with a Micro Four Thirds camera. I'll just go really close to the lens. I don't need it to be completely obliterated, from 15 feet away at f1.2 only with full frame. Like, I don't care. That has nothing to do with telling a story. And so, full frame versus APS-C doesn't really make a difference to me. 10-bit versus 8-bit, that makes a difference. And I don't know if it's Panasonic V-Log is easier to work with than S-Log and Sony, but for me at least, just when I started working in vlog, I was like, whoa, I was able to get exactly what I was thinking about in my head, which I couldn't do with Sony. Sony, I really had to work so hard, and eventually I would get there, but it just took me much, much longer to get there. So I'm a big fan of vlog. I'm a big fan of Panasonic colors. I am all about shooting everything manually, so I could care less about autofocus. I got two anamorphic lenses really cheap. I got the Series 35mm f1.8 and a Series 75mm f1.8, both APS-C lenses that look incredible on the S5. And so I probably could have gotten both of them for the Sony camera because they come in E-mount, and I'm sure it would have been the same. So I don't know, because the crop, it would have looked exactly the same because the A6400 is an APS-C camera, but the cool thing about the S5 is that I could put it into APS-C mode. And so it's a little bit more flexible. And so it's just interesting to me that I am part of this whole YouTube, watching these videos and, considering all this stuff. And these are all great cameras and amazing cameras. And I think what happens at the end of the day is, you buy something. And I think what happens is if you are so fortunate to have stories that need to come out of your body, you're going to wind up working with your camera, and you are going to have no interest in changing that camera unless it breaks. I got kind of caught up in this whole GH7 thing, and I was thinking maybe I should get rid of everything I have and buy a GH7, because why not have autofocus, Why not? Why not be able to shoot ProRes RAW internal into the camera? Why not have 32-bit float? Why not, But then I thought about it, and I thought, why not? Why not? Because you love your camera. Because you just shot a feature film that won a Best Feature Film Award at the Manhattan Film Festival using just that camera, all by yourself. Because you love the colors that come out of the camera, because you love the image, you love the dynamic range, you love the dual native ISO of 640 and 4000 where there is no noise in low light. Like, I could really, really get exactly what I want out of this camera. Why not? Because all the settings are set for me. Like, I know how to use this camera. I know it like the back of my hand. I have all this experience now from the A6400, now the S5, and now you can hand me any camera and I can make it work. So why would I change? What's the advantage? If you are using the camera, if you're the operator, once you learn that camera and once you begin to get what you want, once you begin to see in your editing software exactly what was in your brain, and you get excited and you get thrilled at, like, oh my God, I got it. I nailed every shot. The story is being told, and you're sitting there, and like sometimes when I'm editing, I'm sitting there crying or I'm laughing, like I'm feeling what I'm doing because I got it. I don't need 32-bit float. I come from a pro audio background. I know how to set my audio settings, like I don't need 32-bit float. And by the way, you can still distort in 32-bit float. You still have to know what you're doing to a certain extent. But I'm not interested in it. It doesn't do anything for me. I guess maybe if I was doing more client work and putting lavalier mics on other people and stuff like that, but I'm doing my own kind of work. I mean, I guess if I'm shooting a documentary, yeah, 32-bit float, I can see the advantage to it, but I don't need it. It's not enough to make me abandon what I have and get something new just for that one thing. Autofocus, not an issue for me. I don't care. Dynamic range is better on this camera, I believe, but I could get exactly what I want from both cameras, I'm sure. ProRes RAW, I can't even use it in DaVinci Resolve. I work in DaVinci Resolve. I would have to get some kind of something that, makes it into something else, and why? And why get these gigantic files when I'm getting the image that I want? It looks like a Hollywood movie, what I'm doing. Like, I'm not unhappy with anything, and so why would I change? I'm here to do the best I can to contribute and let you make all the decisions about what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see, what you don't want to see. You could leave. You could scroll down and go to the next video, or you could stay. And you have to really think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and what you need, not what you want, which is a common YouTuber thing too, It's like you want it, but you don't need it. I've heard so many YouTubers make videos about that. And so that's how I feel about the GH7. That's how I feel about the S5. That's how I feel about changing. That's how I feel about the difference between APS-C and micro four thirds and full frame. Like, I can get the exact same thing out of all those. You know, it doesn't really make a difference to me. I love the body on this. I love everything about it, you know. I love using the Hollyland Lark Max on it. It works really well. But I also love using like my Zoom H1N with a regular lavalier mic. I love using a Boya right on top of the camera if I'm close enough. Like, it's all good. There are no limitations here for me. It's not hurting me in any way. And so I wanted to get past all of that because I wanted to talk about something else. And I'm not going to extend this for too long. But I wanted to talk about real quick that somebody came to my YouTube channel the other day to one of my videos and he wrote, "All of your commentary is leftist." I was like, what? Like, what? Like, all my commentary is leftist? Like, first of all, who uses the term leftist in this country? That's kind of weird. But I understand there's a left and a right, and we're talking politically, and, you know, it just kind of, it made me stop. And my response to him was, what's your point? I don't consider myself political, leftist, progressive, liberal. I'm a liberal person. I don't understand why the word liberal became negative words somehow to people. Like, to be liberal, to be open-minded, to, you know, have empathy, because those words kind of go together. Now, he has since, I think, because I can't find the comment, I think he deleted the comment. And you know, this is all in my own head. I'm creating all this on my own. But I'm just thinking, like, he probably, if he deleted it because he thinks I'm a liberal, progressive, and he hates me and he hates everything I believe in. You might have a perspective on what somebody who thinks like me is like, and you would probably be wrong because you don't know me. Unless you've met me, had a conversation with me, hung out with me, shared a meal with me, or at the least met me at a show or something like that, or bumped into me in the street and talked to me, you have no idea what I'm like. None. All you would know is what I did as an artist, you know. But I will say I'm genuine. You know, I'm not going to create something. You know, I might create something that is completely opposite from what I feel, but I'm going to do it in a way that makes you think like, huh, that's kind of messed up, perhaps. Like, I like to do a few things. I like to give the audience the opportunity to imagine, you know, whatever they want to imagine. I like to let the audience, you know, make decisions for themselves. You know, I like to have a very clear script, you know, a beginning, a middle, and an end, a conflict and a resolution, a problem that must be solved, definitely. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on in my work that's like, oh, I wonder what he meant by that. I wonder what happened to that character. Like, that's interesting, you know. But I am a social justice warrior, and I do believe in basic human rights for everybody. I don't care who you are or what you believe in or what God you pray to or how you love or any of that. I don't care. I don't care if you're black or white or Asian or whatever. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care. When it comes to racism, misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, all of it, I'm against it. And I'm also the guy who's going to speak out loudly about it all the time. Like, for example, I did a play called Brooklyn Quartet. I talked about it in my last video. And I did these Q&As after every show. And the character, Esther Alvarez, who is a Latina, who also happens to have a white Jewish mother, but a Dominican father, her character, the only way that I described her in that play is I described her as 6 feet tall and brownstone beautiful. So yeah, I said she's tall. But brownstone beautiful, that's up to you. I think brownstones are beautiful buildings. And they're Brooklyn. And she's the city. And, you know, like that. I gave the vibe. But I didn't tell you what she looked like. And so after one of my Q&As, there were 2 women in the audience who got into an argument as to how Esther Alvarez wore her hair, what she looked like, whether she was light skin or dark skin, because of the way she had to live her life. She became a civil rights attorney. She was a valedictorian in school, but she was also a hard ass, you know. I mean, she was like straight up from the hood, but incredibly intelligent. Like, Esther Alvarez was one of a kind, at least for her. I'm not going to say she was one of a kind because she was based on 4 friends of mine that I know. So she was actually a morph of real people, because that's what I always do. When I create characters, I base them on real people that I know. And so these 2 women got into this argument like, you know, what kind of hair did Esther have? Was it natural? Was it a big afro or really curly? Or did she straighten her hair, like get a Dominican, you know? And one woman was like, oh no, Esther Alvarez would never straighten her hair. She would never do that. It was always natural because of this and that. And the other woman was like, nah, she definitely straightened her hair because she knew what it took to, you know, to climb the ladder in the corporate world. And she was going to do what she had to do to get to that position of power. So then she'd go back and help her people and help her family. And they got into like, it was really intense. Like, people thought they were going to like come to blows. And I thought, that's why I wrote the play. And so everybody's welcome in my channel. Everybody. Like, I create stuff so that I hope that there is a conversation. And I guess, you know, I guess the most important thing that I've learned on YouTube recently, because my channel is starting to gain some traction, is that the minute I was just completely, absolutely myself, like not trying to be a YouTuber, you know, not trying to do what everybody was telling me to do, but just turn on the camera, just be myself, and, you know, put together videos that are fun for me to make and that I think are interesting and that are kind of like short films. And yeah, my personality is going to bleed through. My belief systems, my values are going to bleed through. And frankly, if you don't like it, I don't care. You know, I'm not here to make friends with anybody. I don't need any more friends, you know? But I am here to resonate with everybody, I hope. Because that's how I feel about when I'm performing live in a theater or when I'm making a movie. Like, I have, you know, I have no target audience. You know, my target audience is hopefully the entire human race. When I go around the country, you know, working on a play, like developing a play, like workshopping it before I do my final production, which is, you know, usually in New York City. But I try to go to cities that are more conservative, actually, because I don't believe in preaching to the choir. Because I'm trying to create work that makes you consider, you know, makes you think, makes you feel like you've been disrupted out of what you only believe in your little circle, in your little tiny little world, and kind of open up your mind to everybody and have a little bit more empathy. And think about like, hey, maybe I don't know everything, you know? But everybody's welcome and everybody's open to discussion, and I'm wide open to it, you know? I had a play called Broke Wide Open, you know? I mean, but I want you to know who I am. And you know, if you go to my website, you will clearly, completely, without a doubt, know who I am, trust me. And if you watch my YouTube videos, I think the same thing, you're gonna know who I am. I don't think there's any doubt, I don't think there's any question about who I am and what I believe in and what I think and the way I look at the world. And, you know, I'm somebody who is going to get involved. You know what I mean? Like, I don't just speak from behind my keyboard or on the screen. Like, if I'm out in the world and I see something that's unjust, if I see somebody being picked on, or I see racism, or if I'm in a store and somebody takes care of me before they take care of the black woman with the big hair next to me, I'm going to speak on that. And I'm going to perhaps make people feel uncomfortable in the process. But I'm always going to do what I think is right. And I'm always going to let anybody who's around me know that I am their ally, no matter who they are, always. Because that's the least I could do, given my privilege, right? Like, I got privilege all over my body, simply because I'm a white male. You know, like, we have to figure out how to live together as a society, but I'm talking about basic human rights, you know, the right to work anywhere. Like, you can't be discriminated against because of your color or your religion or your gender, stuff like that. You know, you can't be kept from learning. You can't be kept from a school like so many people were for not even too long ago in this country. And so I speak about that stuff openly all the time. And that's a fact. And I had a lot of self-loathing when I was a kid about that, because my closest friends were all black. And when I was young, I realized I lived in a completely different world than they lived in, and that I was much safer than them. And I had much more opportunity, and people looked at me differently, and nobody was afraid of me the way they were afraid of them. I knew that when I was 4 or 5 years old. What I'm saying is, I like to allow people to figure a lot of it out for themselves. You know, I think that my audience is incredibly intelligent, intellectual, you know, spiritual, all of it. And so I don't make it easy. My work is not easy, you know. I mean, it's clear. And, you know, I always try to write a good, concise script, even though they're long. But I like to leave a lot to your imagination. And as a result, I love when these conversations happen, especially among people who don't agree. Because then, as we have conversations, we can realize how, as much as we have these differences, we're kind of alike too. And that's the kind of world I want to live in. Like, you don't have to think the way I think. You don't have to believe in the things that I believe in. So I don't know. Something happened to me, I guess, and I've never shut up since, and I always will speak out. It's kind of like a life rule for me. Like, if I see something wrong, I'm going to say something. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to get there and let this person know you are not alone. Community, everyone, society, living together, you know, coming from different places, looking different, having different backgrounds. So having different history behind us in terms of our ancestors, having different levels of privilege just because of the way we look, gender issues, you know, color issues, all of it. So whoever that was who left me the comment, thank you for that, because it spurred me on to make this video and to say this. And I kind of wish I said this at the beginning of the video, because perhaps I lost a lot of people by the time I got to this, but whatever. You know what? I'm glad I said it. I'm not ashamed of who I am. I will never be ashamed of who I am. I'm proud of who I am. And I'm not going to hide from who I am. And I want you to know clearly who I am. But I also want you to know that I will never shut you down. I will never not invite you to my space to speak peacefully and respectfully. Never. That's a lesson I learned from my father. My father was a horrible racist when I was growing up, but he never shut me down. Like, I told him he was a racist when I was 5 years old. He never told me to shut the fuck up. He never spoke over me. He never walked away from me. He always listened. And I swear to God, by the time I got older, that man had changed. And so as a result, he taught me anybody can change. It's possible. Everybody has a right to change. People who have hate in their hearts for no apparent reason other than racism or anti-Semitism or misogyny or xenophobia or homophobia or whatever, they can change. And usually you hate somebody because you don't know them. Because it's really hard to hate somebody when you get to know them. Everybody's welcome, but I'm not going to change for anybody. I could change my perspective because I'm always open. I'm wide open. My first play was called Broke Wide Open. And so I'm here for all of us, you know? And as I often say, and here's to a better world for all of us.